Long before the rise of modern nations, before the dominance of Europe, and even as the great empires of the ancient world carved their names into history, there existed in the highlands of East Africa a civilization of immense power, wealth, and influence. A kingdom that commanded trade across continents, built monuments that defied imagination, and stood among the greatest empires on earth. This was Aksum. To understand Aksum, we must begin not with kings or conquest, but with the land itself. Long before Aksum became a symbol of power, trade, and culture, the story began in the highlands of northern Ethiopia and Eritrea. These elevated plateaus, carved by rivers and nourished by seasonal rains, created a fertile and sustainable environment unlike the arid deserts that surrounded them. Here, human settlement was possible on a scale rarely seen in East Africa. The valleys and terraced hillsides allowed communities to cultivate grains, raise livestock, and establish permanent villages. From these early settlements emerged a social organization capable of supporting a growing population. A crucial foundation for any civilization aspiring to greatness. But geography alone could not explain the rise of Aksum. Its unique position near the Red Sea was equally critical. This waterway connected Africa to Arabia, the Mediterranean, and the Indian Ocean, creating a corridor for commerce, culture, and ideas. Traders, travelers, and merchants flowed through these corridors. They brought ivory from African interiors, spices from India, and textiles from Arabia. Aksum's inhabitants became intermediaries in a global network, turning location into influence and influence into power. Archaeological evidence shows that by the early 1st millennium BCE, settlements in this region were evolving into a complex society. Terraced fields, storage pits, and early administrative structures indicate sophisticated planning. Communities were connected by roads and trade paths, suggesting cooperation, regulation, and an emerging sense of statehood. Aksum's environment and location provided the twin engines for its rise: fertile land to feed its people, and trade routes to enrich them. Together, they set the stage for one of Africa's greatest civilizations. The wealth and power of Aksum were not forged in isolation. They were earned through commerce, trade that connected continents, crossed seas, and bridged cultures. The kingdom's port city of Adulis, strategically located on the Red Sea coast, became the gateway to the ancient world. Ships arrived from distant lands, laden with goods that fascinated and enriched the empire. Exotic items, ivory, gold, incense, exotic animals and spices passed through Aksumite hands, while the kingdom exported agricultural produce, textiles, and crafted goods. Aksum's position made it an indispensable link between Africa and the wider world. Merchants and traders from Rome, Arabia, and India recognized its strategic value. Even the Byzantine Empire corresponded with Aksumite rulers, documenting trade agreements and diplomatic exchanges. Coins, minted in gold, silver, and bronze, were introduced during this period, marking the kingdom as one of the few in Africa capable of creating its own currency. These coins bore the faces of kings, inscriptions, ingeas, and eventually Christian symbols. They were more than currency. They were a statement of political authority and economic integration into the global system. Trade was not just economic, it was social and cultural. Goods carried ideas, beliefs, and technologies. Markets became centers of learning and exchange, spreading knowledge across East Africa and beyond. By controlling commerce, Aksum gained the wealth and stability necessary to expand its influence into surrounding regions. Wealth alone does not make an empire. Power requires organization, authority, and symbols that inspire awe. The rulers of Aksum were not mere chieftains. They were kings, presiding over an empire that stretched from the highlands to the Red Sea. Their authority was absolute. but it was exercised through a sophisticated system of administrators, military leaders, and religious advisors. To demonstrate their power and immortalize their reigns, Aksumite kings constructed monumental stelae, towering granite obelisks, some reaching over 20 meters in height. Carved from a single piece of stone, these obelisks were intricately designed to resemble multi-story buildings with false doors, windows, and symbolic decorations. These stelae served as funerary monuments for kings and elites, marking tombs and sacred spaces. They represented not only architectural and engineering skill, but also the organization of labor and resources required to mobilize thousands of workers. The cities of Aksum were vibrant centers of life. Houses were constructed with locally available materials, often stone and timber, and decorated with artistic motifs. Markets thrived, artisans produced pottery, metalwork, and jewelry, and religious practices shaped everyday life. Agriculture sustained the population, with terraced fields and irrigation systems supporting crops like barley, millet, and wheat. Livestock, cattle, sheep, and goats provided sustenance, trade goods, and social status. The kingdom's ability to manage resources effectively allowed it to support monumental construction, long-distance trade, and a growing elite class. Aksum's history is not only a story of power and wealth, it is a story of belief and identity. In the 4th century CE, under King Ezana, Aksum underwent a transformation that would shape its legacy for centuries. Christianity was adopted as the official religion of the kingdom, making Aksum one of the earliest states in the world to embrace this faith. Alongside the Roman Empire, churches were built, religious iconography changed, and inscriptions began to bear references to the Christian God. Coins reflected this shift, displaying crosses alongside the faces of kings, signaling a new spiritual and cultural identity. This transformation did not erase the past, it built upon it. Aksum preserved earlier traditions while incorporating new beliefs, creating a unique religious and cultural identity. Monastic centers emerged, and Christian scholarship flourished. The kingdom became a spiritual center, linking Africa with the wider Christian world. Even today, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church maintains practices, liturgy, and sacred texts that trace their origins back to this pivotal era, preserving Aksum's influence across centuries. At the height of its power, Aksum was recognized as one of the great civilizations of the ancient world. Its influence extended across the Red Sea into Arabia. Its trade networks reached India and the Mediterranean, and its culture and religion shaped regions far beyond its borders. The Aksumite kings projected power through military campaigns, diplomacy, and strategic alliances. They controlled surrounding territories, secured trade routes, and maintained order within the kingdom. The empire's wealth allowed it to support monumental architecture, maintain a standing army, and fund extensive religious institutions. Cities like Aksum itself were thriving centers of administration, commerce, and culture. The massive obelisks, royal tombs, and intricately carved inscriptions served as both symbols of authority and lasting testaments to the kingdom's sophistication. Trade remained a central pillar of Aksumite society. Ivory, gold, spices, and exotic animals moved through its ports, connecting Africa to Arabia, India, and beyond. This commerce not only enriched the kingdom, but also facilitated cultural exchange, bringing new ideas, technologies, and practices into the highlands. Aksum was not merely a regional power. It was a global civilization, acknowledged by contemporary empires and remembered through both material and cultural legacies. Its achievements in trade, architecture, governance, and religion placed it alongside Rome, Persia, and other great powers of the ancient world. Even the greatest empires are not immune to the tides of time. Aksum, once a colossal force that dominated trade, commanded armies, and shaped culture across East Africa and Arabia, eventually faced challenges that would change its destiny. By the late 6th century CE, the factors that had once fueled Aksum's rise began to shift. The kingdom, which had flourished on its strategic location along Red Sea trade routes, began to experience a gradual decline. The global economy was changing, the Indian Ocean trade network was evolving, and new powers, both in Arabia and along the African coast, emerged, redirecting commerce away from Aksum's ports. The very trade routes that had made Aksum rich, the flow of ivory, gold, exotic animals, frankincense and spices, were increasingly bypassed by new maritime routes. The rise of Islamic powers in the Arabian Peninsula during the 7th century CE profoundly altered the dynamics of Red Sea commerce. Cities like Adulis, which had once bustled with foreign merchants and caravans, began to see fewer ships arriving from distant lands. Aksum's economic engine slowed, and its wealth gradually diminished. Archaeological evidence shows that the city centers and monumental buildings that had once demonstrated extraordinary organizational capacity fell into disuse. Excavations of sites such as Yeha and Aksum reveal that public construction decreased, monumental stelae ceased to be raised, and previously bustling urban centers shrank in size. Environmental changes may also have contributed to the decline. Scholars suggest that shifts in rainfall patterns could have disrupted the highland agriculture that sustained Aksumite society. Soil erosion and deforestation may have reduced the fertility of the terraced fields that once fed thousands of people. Over time, populations migrated toward more sustainable regions, leaving some cities sparsely inhabited. Yet even as Aksum's political power waned, its cultural and religious influence endured. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church, whose roots trace back to King Ezana's conversion to Christianity in the 4th century CE, continued to shape social and spiritual life across the region. Churches built during Aksum's golden age remained active centers of worship, and the architectural and artistic traditions pioneered by Aksumite craftsmen influenced successive generations. Aksum's written legacy also persisted. The Ge'ez script, developed during the height of the kingdom, became the foundation for Ethiopia's literature, liturgy, and record-keeping for centuries. Ancient inscriptions carved into stelae, coins, and monumental buildings provided later generations with invaluable historical records, allowing modern scholars to reconstruct the story of a civilization that might otherwise have been lost. Despite the decline in wealth and political authority, Aksum continued to play a symbolic role. It remained a spiritual heartland, a place associated with divine kingship, sacred artifacts, and the continuity of a unique African Christian identity. Some legends even link Aksum to the Ark of the Covenant, preserved in the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion in Aksum, a powerful symbol of the city's enduring mystique. Even today, the legacy of Aksum echoes across Ethiopia and the world. Its monumental obelisks, some towering more than 20 meters, remain standing, testaments to engineering skill, social organization, and artistic vision. Archaeologists continue to uncover treasures, coins, ceramics, inscriptions that reveal the empire's complex trade networks and far-reaching influence. Aksum was more than a political or economic power. It was a civilization that linked continents, religions, and cultures. Its decline was not the end of its story, but a transformation. From the highlands of Ethiopia, its traditions endured through successive kingdoms, through centuries of change, and into the modern era. The story of Aksum reminds us that history is not only measured by conquest and territory, but by cultural resilience, innovation, and influence. Even as empires rise and fall, the marks they leave behind, the buildings, the faith, the ideas, can survive millennia. The civilization that once rivaled Rome in wealth, power, and culture now stands as a symbol of endurance. Its people, traditions, and faith continue to shape the identity of a nation. And its monuments, still standing after more than 1,000 years, speak silently of an empire that once defied the expectations of the ancient world. This was Aksum, a kingdom of kings, traders, builders, and believers. A civilization that rose high, faced the tides of history, and left a legacy that time itself could not erase.